So what is an integrated management system? What does it look like? Why bother? How might it help a company? Well, I suppose the obvious starting point is a company maybe that has, let's say, 2 or 3 ISO certificates. Should we think about that first? So for instance, they might have ISO 9001, they might have ISO 14001, and they might have, for instance, ISO 27001, maybe they might have 45001 at some stage. So let's say they've got 1 or 2 or 3 of these certificates. And they've found that over the years, they've been managed in very separate ways. And they might have subject matter experts in these different certificates. So when we talk about an integrated management system, we're talking about, I guess, 2 things primarily. We're talking about documented information being maybe collapsed. So we might, instead of having an environmental management manual and a quality manual, we might have an integrated manual, for instance. But there might be also behavior of people. Do they think about them in separate ways, or do they just think, well, this is what we've got to do at work, and they don't think about it? I guess we could also add to that the activities such as internal audits. So let's imagine I'm doing a quality management system audit, and I'm walking around the business and I'm talking to people, and I'm looking at documents and watching what they do, and I collect a lot of evidence and I give it to the top management and I say, these are the results of the 9001 audit. Then the next day, someone else goes into the same areas and conducts one on 14001, etc., etc. So we have 3 different approaches. Now that might be quite time consuming, but I suppose on the plus side, we might get good expertise from each of the 3. But what if someone had enough knowledge of 2 or 3 disciplines and was able to spend time at someone's desk and talk about all of those things? That should be quicker. That should be quicker in theory, but of course it does put a bit more pressure on the auditors. So that's one thing we could think of. Another thing we might add, I suppose, is the management review. We could have a management team saying, well, look, are we going to talk today about information security or environmental management, or are we just going to talk about our business? Are we just going to talk about our business and how well our business is doing and look at all these different aspects? Okay, so that's another thing we might think of. I suppose another example we might have is a procedure. Let's say there's a documented procedure for how to run a purchasing process, let's say. Now, do we just have that procedure to focus on the requirements of this standard? Or maybe we also think about that procedure to focus on this standard. So that's another way of thinking about it, is that one procedure brings in the different requirements from different standards, and also, of course, the requirements of various laws and the requirements of the customer, etc., etc. So that's another way of thinking about it. The other way, I guess, we might think of integrated management systems is maybe when we're thinking about risk. You know, if we're thinking about risk, could we have an hour meeting where we look at the risks from each of these areas? Okay, so that might be another thing. Well, let's think about, you know, if you're a top management, you might think about finance risks. But what are the risks of us being late with a project? What are the risks of us making a mistake and giving someone the wrong report, for instance? What's the risk of the confidentiality being leaked, etc., etc.? So risk might be another way of integrating, getting all the subject matter experts in a room and doing everything at the same time. So this is really a personal choice for an organization. There are benefits. But even if you're a company that only has, you can see I'm quite fussy with colors. Let's say you're a company that only has 14001. You don't have this, you don't have this, and you don't have that. Does that mean you have no need to talk about quality? Of course not. Does that mean you have no need to talk about information security? Maybe, maybe not. Does that mean you're not interested in health and safety? No, of course not. So you can integrate a system but only have one certificate. Or you might do that with 9001. You might say within our quality management system, we're going to bring in all these different elements and manage it all in one way. So I hope that helps. Integrated management systems, there's a lot to think about, lots of benefits, absolutely. And I think with the arrival of Annex SL, the template for all management system standards, it's going to help. But it's not just about documents, it's about, you know, people's behavior and the activities going on in the business. Certainly, if you have an external certification body and you have more than one certificate, I would say, if you haven't done it already, investigate the possibility of that body doing more than one certificate at the same time, an integrated audit, because that should save you a bit of money. But of course, it does mean that your auditor coming in has got to understand the different standards. Okay, hope that helps.